This reading from Mark is kind of interesting. It comes from the first chapter of Mark, and we're going to spend a little time on that. But a couple of review things I think we need to go through first. Written documents always will reflect the time in which they were written. So we keep in mind that Mark wrote around the year 70 about things that took place in the year 30. We're going to see bits of events going on in the year 70 slipping into Mark's dialogues in his gospel. And this is kind of a rule that you can see even taking place in our world today. How many of you have seen the movie A Game of Their Own about the Women's Baseball League during World War II? A League of Their Own. Thank you, Dick. In the movie, if you remember, the team is out there warming up, and a ball gets away from the infield, and a young woman comes out of the spectators who are watching them practice, and throws the ball back to, I think it's Madonna, who's playing second base. And she nods at the woman and says, "You got a good arm." If you remember that scene in the movie, the woman was black. Now, name a city in the United States that scene could have taken place in 1942. That was thrown in reflecting 1980. And you see the same type of information happening in Mark's, in fact, in all the Gospels. They all reflect the age in which they were written. Now, if we take a look at the historical background, in the first century, people had no idea about what a germ is. You know, bacteria, viruses did not enter the vocabulary in probably, the 19th century? In the first century, people believed if you were ill, besides being a bad person, it was caused by an evil demon. We even see that kind of taking place, man, I've got a devil of a cold. Can't even say it right. But that's what's happening. That's what they believed. And if you came in contact with someone, they knew diseases were communicated, but what you caught was the evil demon, not a germ or a virus. And we'll see that coming up as we take a look into this reading. Mark starts his gospel out with 3 stories of cures, miracle cures. The first is the man in Capernaum who has an unclean spirit, and he drives the spirit out. The second is he cures Peter's mother-in-law. That was so she could get up and cook for him, if you remember the story. And the third one is the reading that Cheryl had this morning. In reading this, I don't know if you noticed, where Cheryl read, after the man talked to him, that Jesus became angry. If you take a look at most of your Bibles at home, it says Jesus had pity on him. If you have the NRSV, the NIV will have, he felt sorry for him. There's a discrepancy there. Earlier fragments that we have of Mark's gospel say that anger is what Jesus expressed. Another kind of axiom that when you're dealing with scripture studies, if there's a difference, the editor that uses the kinder words about Jesus, trying to make him look good, is probably wrong. He did not like the expression of anger for Jesus. What we have to remember here, if we look at this a little bit deeper, anger begins to make sense. Because Jesus was not angry at the leper, but he was angry about a system that isolated people when they were ill. You know, lepers were supposed to stay away from crowds. If they were near people, they're supposed to be yelling, "Unclean, unclean," and people would scatter. They had to live alone with other lepers. Jesus was angry at a system that isolated people. And think about it. If you take your sick people and isolate them, how are they going to get care? Add to that the fact that there's a religious rule that calls them unclean. And what we have happening here is a man who ignored the protocol. He did not yell unclean. What he did, said to Jesus, "If you will, you can make me clean." Now, what did Jesus do? He touched him. He violated the same rule that the leper did. We're going to come back to that, but keep that in mind. That is very important. And when he mentioned to Jesus that he could make him clean, think of the irony that's involved there. You have a person who is, quote, unclean. You can check the rules out. I think it's in chapter 15 of Leviticus if you really want to have a good night's sleep. But that's what the rules said. So, and Jesus violated the rule. And what did he do? He said, "Be made clean." You've got an unclean person. You have a second unclean person. And that second one says, "You're clean." The irony of what Mark is trying to get across to us. Basically, the first thing that came to my mind is the first century had a similar problem with their Medicaid program. They couldn't get it expanded. Think about that. What are we doing to those people in our life? We're isolating them from medical care. One of the things that happens here, and this is something Jesus sends the man off to go to the priest so he can be declared unclean and make his offering to the temple. What does he do? He tells them to keep quiet about it, So what does he do? He starts praising God, and everybody gets amazed at what they see happening. Jesus has now become a celebrity. The wow factor has taken over. In fact, I think when Cheryl read the end of that reading, there were so many people, he couldn't go into town. He had to stay outside the town because the crowds were so big. He's got his own reality TV show going on. And think about it. This man is going out who's just cured, and he's preaching Jesus' message. The people are not interested in the message. They're interested in the magic. How often do we do that? What Mark is doing here, right in the very beginning, he is addressing an issue. What's Jesus' message? To love and to alleviate suffering and evil. All three cases. The man in Capernaum, probably today we'd say he was having fits or had schizophrenia. But that evil spirit was driven out. Peter's mother-in-law had a fever. You know, basically think of in terms of having a fever demon that Jesus removed. And then this man, he cleared the leprosy, basically making him clean. If we take a look at that in our lives today, I think a lot of times we want Jesus to be a celebrity. Keep in mind, he wasn't, and that was not his intention. He was a reformer. He was a prophet, and not the future kind of predictor, but the prophet who called you to task for your actions. We tend to forget that. When I was growing up, the whole idea of miracles. I was born, raised Roman Catholic, went to parochial schools, and the miracles, can you believe this, were written down by the evangelist so that we would have proof that Jesus was divine. Nowhere in any of these stories do we see any stories of divinity about Jesus. We see stories of Jesus' concern, caring, and loving. As I grew older, the whole idea of a proof for divinity, that fell by the wayside. But we still have a problem in that we want to make Jesus a superstar. We even wrote a musical about it. I didn't, but Sean has done some of the music. That's not the goal. The goal is for us to realize that we have a place to work. You think about this, In actuality, what Mark did would be considered trivial. 3 cures, miracles were expected in that day and age. Mark had nobody questioning whether this happened or not. He's writing in the year 70. Historically, did it happen? We don't know. But Mark is trying to get across to his congregation what Jesus' purpose was. Love, cure, care for. Those were the important things to get across. We all have tasks, projects that can be very important. I'll just use the Medicaid expansion. A lot of work was done on this. Our legislature they didn't even discuss it. That can be very frustrating. It can make us angry. That is not necessarily going to be a solution. That's one of the problems. What did Jesus do here? That old statement. He reached out and touched this man. We're talking about a relationship. That's what we need to be working on. All of us have rough edges. Maybe not me. But everybody has those edges. And we need to take that into consideration when we're dealing with people. Don't let that edge be the thing that breaks a relationship. And that can be difficult sometimes. These occurrences take place all the time, especially in families. I have a daughter who went and I think everybody in the family would agree she overstepped her bounds. And it took a while to rebuild that relationship with her. But that has happened. But that's what we need to be doing. We need to take into consideration our own rough edges and that of the people around us. Hopefully, what we said in the very beginning in our opening prayer of confession, that relationship between us is also an expression of the divinity in us. You know, I believe it's the Hindus who have this expression where they bow. What they're saying is, the divinity in me greets the divinity in you. Think about that. That's the approach we need to be taking. You know, what can we do? Do we have people out there who maybe we've neglected? You know, a phone call, surprise them. That might make their day. It's a way to open a door. If we keep in mind those that, you know, we always get trapped in our dogmas, whether you're Republican or Democrat. Those are dogmas. You know, relationship always trumps dogma, whether it's political, religious. Probably the religious can sometimes be the most dangerous because, you know, my ideas are right. You laugh? That's insulting. Relationship trumps dogma always. What Mark showed us in the first chapter, what the goal is, we know that. But they were done in little bitty steps. And that's where we can step out and basically smooth edges. I can even smooth a few of my own if I stop to think about it. And that's what we can do. What I would like to do right now is if we just keep in mind, you know, God lives in us, we live in God. And in that relationship we have between each of us here is an expression of God. You know, that's a choice, because we can turn it into something else very easily if we're angry. I'd like to close with a little prayer. One of my favorite authors, Michael Morwood. And this, in fact, this is a prayer that Cheryl and I say every day in our morning prayer, actually, together. May the Spirit within us be a source of healing and consolation. May the Spirit within us strengthen us when we are weak, warm us when we are cold-hearted, bend us when we are stubborn. That doesn't apply to me. Move us when we are uncaring. Guide us in the way of love. May the Spirit within us shine in all we do. Thank you.
You have been watching a progressive Christian video from the Community Christian Church of Springfield, Missouri. We encourage our viewers to donate to our efforts in feeding the homeless and hungry of our community. Write to us at Reverend Dr. Ray at AOL.com for more information.